The rain had stopped by the time they lowered my baby into the ground. I remember thinking how wrong that was. The sky should have been crying. The whole world should have been weeping for my 7-year-old son who loved dinosaurs and hated broccoli and always fell asleep with one sock on and one sock off. But instead, the clouds parted, and a beam of sunlight cut through like some kind of cruel joke, as if the universe was telling me to look on the bright side. There is no bright side when you bury your child. I stood at the edge of that hole in my blue dress, the one Jaden picked out for me last Easter because he said it matched his favorite crayon. My husband Brandon stood next to me, his hand on my lower back, and I thought I would fall apart right there. I thought my legs would give out and I would tumble into that grave with my son because living without him seemed impossible. But I did not fall. I stood there and watched them cover him with dirt, and I felt something inside me turn to stone. The reception was at our house. People filled every room with their casseroles and their sympathy and their "he's in a better place now" comments that made me want to scream. I nodded and thanked them and accepted their hugs while counting the minutes until they would all leave. Brandon played the grieving father perfectly. He dabbed at his eyes with a handkerchief. He clutched family members and shook hands with colleagues. He gave a small speech about Jaden's bravery during his battle with leukemia, about how our son never complained even when the treatments made him so sick he could not lift his head. I watched my husband perform and I felt nothing. By 6 o'clock, the house was finally empty. Brandon said he needed to lie down, that the day had taken everything out of him. I heard the bedroom door close upstairs. I sat alone in my living room surrounded by flowers and sympathy cards and photographs of my son's face smiling at me from every surface. That is when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Jefferson Elementary School. My heart lurched because for one wild second I thought maybe there had been a mistake, maybe Jaden was still alive, maybe he was waiting for me to pick him up like I used to every day at 3:15. But of course that was not possible. The leukemia had made sure of that. "Mrs. Thompson?" The voice was gentle, careful. "This is Patricia Morrison, Jaden's teacher." "Mrs. Morrison." I cleared my throat. "Hello. I am so sorry to bother you today of all days," she said. "I was at the service this morning. It was beautiful. Thank you." There was a pause. "The reason I'm calling is that we still have some of Jaden's belongings here at the school. His artwork, his journals, some books he loved. The principal was going to have them sent over, but I thought maybe you might want to come get them yourself. See his classroom one more time." I closed my eyes. The thought of walking into that room where my son used to sit and learn and laugh with his friends felt like pressing on a bruise. But I also knew I needed those things. Every piece of him that remained in this world was precious now. "I can come tonight," I said. "Is that okay?" "Of course. I'll be here until 7 grading papers. Take your time." I did not tell Brandon where I was going. He was asleep or pretending to be, and I did not have the energy to explain. I grabbed my keys and drove through the quiet streets of our neighborhood with the windows down, letting the cool evening air wash over my face. Jefferson Elementary looked different in the fading light. During the day it was always so alive with children running and screaming and climbing on the playground equipment. Now it sat silent, the parking lot nearly empty except for a few cars near the back entrance. I pulled into a spot near the front doors and turned off the engine. For a moment I just sat there, staring at the building where my son had spent his last healthy year before the diagnosis changed everything. I could almost see him running across that playground, his backpack bouncing on his shoulders, turning to wave at me with that gap-toothed grin. A car pulled into the lot. I did not pay much attention at first. Teachers worked late sometimes. Janitors came and went. But something about the way this car parked in the far corner away from the lights caught my eye. I recognized the car. It was a black sedan with a dent on the rear bumper from when Brandon backed into a shopping cart 2 months ago. It was my husband's car. My stomach dropped. Brandon was supposed to be home sleeping. Brandon was supposed to be devastated by the death of his son. Brandon was supposed to be anywhere but here in this parking lot 2 hours after we buried our child. I watched as the driver's door opened and my husband stepped out. He looked around nervously, checking his surroundings like a man with something to hide. Then he walked around to the passenger side of the car. The door opened and a woman got out. She was tall with long brown hair and a tight red dress that had no business being at an elementary school. She smiled up at Brandon and he pulled her into his arms. Right there in the parking lot. Right there in the fading sunlight. Right there 2 hours after we put our son in the ground. I watched my husband kiss another woman, and something inside me shattered into a million pieces. His hands moved to her waist, pulling her closer. She laughed at something he whispered in her ear. They stood there wrapped around each other like two people without a care in the world, like two people who had not just attended a child's funeral. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. My breath came in short gasps. The world tilted sideways, and I thought I might pass out from the shock of what I was seeing. This was not happening. This could not be happening. Not today. Not ever. But it was happening. It was real. My husband was embracing another woman while our son's grave was still fresh with turned earth. They finally pulled apart and the woman got back in her car. A silver coupe. She drove away without looking in my direction. Brandon watched her go, then got back in his own car and sat there for a moment. I ducked down in my seat, heart pounding, praying he would not notice me. He drove past without stopping. He did not see me. He was probably already composing the lie he would tell me when he got home, something about needing fresh air or visiting the cemetery alone. I sat in that parking lot for 10 minutes before I could move. My hands were shaking. My whole body was shaking. The grief I had been drowning in all day was suddenly joined by something else, something hot and sharp that burned in my chest. Betrayal. On the worst day of my life, my husband was with another woman. On the day we buried our baby boy, Brandon was kissing someone else. I finally made myself get out of the car and walk into the school. Mrs. Morrison was waiting in Jaden's classroom with a box of his things. She hugged me and told me what a wonderful student he was, how he always helped the other children, how he made everyone laugh. I nodded and smiled and said the right things while my mind spun in circles. I took the box with Jaden's drawings and his favorite books and the macaroni picture frame he made me for Mother's Day. I thanked Mrs. Morrison for everything she did for my son. And then I drove home to the man who had destroyed me twice in one day. Brandon was in the kitchen when I walked in, pouring himself a glass of water. He looked up with red-rimmed eyes, still playing his part. "Where did you go?" he asked. "The school called. They had Jaden's things." He nodded slowly. "That must have been hard. Going there." I looked at my husband. I looked at the man I had loved for 12 years, the man I had built a life with, the man I had trusted completely. I looked at him and saw a stranger. "Yes," I said. "It was hard." I walked past him and went upstairs to our bedroom. I set Jaden's box on the bed and pulled out his drawings one by one. Pictures of our family. Pictures of dinosaurs and robots and superheroes. Pictures of a happy little boy who had no idea his father was living a lie. That night I did not sleep. I lay in the dark next to Brandon and stared at the ceiling while he snored peacefully beside me. My mind raced with questions I could not answer. How long had this been going on? Who was she? Did he love her? Did he ever really love me? But beneath all those questions was something else. Something that began to take shape as the hours passed and the darkness gave way to the first gray light of dawn. I was not going to fall apart. I was not going to scream or cry or beg for explanations. I was not going to give Brandon the satisfaction of seeing me broken. No, I was going to plan. I was going to prepare. I was going to wait for the perfect moment. And then I was going to take back everything he had stolen from me. My son was gone and I could not change that. But my life was not over. My story was not finished. Brandon thought he knew me. He thought I was just a grieving mother who would lean on him and need him and never suspect a thing. He was wrong. He was so very wrong. 3 days after the funeral, I began to watch my husband like a scientist studying a specimen under glass. I noticed things I had been too busy, too exhausted, too consumed with caring for Jaden to see before. The way Brandon always kept his phone face down on the counter. The way he angled his body away from me when he texted. The way his eyes darted to the door when it was time for him to leave for work, like he could not wait to escape. He did not know I had seen him in that parking lot. He thought his secret was safe. And for now, I needed him to keep thinking that. On the 4th day, Denise came over with a pot of soup she had made and the kind of fierce concern only a best friend can offer. We had known each other since college, through every heartbreak and triumph and ordinary Tuesday in between. She had held my hand through Jaden's diagnosis, through every round of chemotherapy, through those final terrible weeks when hope slipped away like water through my fingers. She took one look at my face and set the soup on the counter. "Talk to me," she said. "What is going on?" I had intended to keep quiet, to hold my cards close until I figured out what to do. But something about the way Denise looked at me, with 20 years of friendship in her eyes, made the words spill out before I could stop them. "Brandon is having an affair." Denise went still. Her hand gripped the edge of the kitchen island. "What did you just say?" "I saw them. At the school the day of the funeral. He was with a woman in the parking lot. They were kissing like teenagers who could not keep their hands off each other." "Nicole." Denise's voice cracked. "Are you sure? Maybe it was just, maybe there's an explanation." "There is no explanation for what I saw." His hands were all over her. He was smiling. "Denise, 2 hours after we buried our son, my husband was smiling at another woman. Denise pulled me into a hug and I let her hold me for a long moment. When she finally stepped back, her expression had changed. The shock was gone, replaced by something harder and colder. What are you going to do? I don't know yet. But I am not going to confront him. Not yet. Why not? He deserves to know you know. He deserves to see your face when you tell him exactly what kind of man he is. I shook my head. If I confront him now, what happens? He apologizes. He cries. He begs for forgiveness and swears it will never happen again. And I am left standing there deciding whether to believe him while I am still so raw from losing Jaden that I can barely function. Denise was quiet for a moment. You want to wait until you are stronger. I want to wait until I have a plan. I want to know exactly what I am dealing with before I make any moves. I need to find out who she is, how long this has been going on, everything. And then? I looked at my best friend and I felt something cold and clear settle in my chest. And then I am going to leave him. But I am going to do it on my terms, in my own time, in a way that he never sees coming. Denise nodded slowly. Okay. How can I help? Just be here. I need someone who knows the truth. I need someone I can talk to when pretending to be his loving wife becomes too much. I'm always here. You know that. That night Brandon came home late. He said he had been working on a big project, that the office needed him, that he was sorry he could not be more present during this difficult time. I nodded and told him I understood. I made him dinner and asked about his day and smiled when he kissed my forehead before going upstairs. Inside I felt nothing but ice. When he fell asleep, I crept into his home office. His laptop was password protected, but he had always been careless with his phone. I knew the passcode because he never bothered to change it from his birthday, the same combination he used for everything. I scrolled through his messages with trembling fingers. Her name was Tiffany Reed. She worked in his marketing department. And she had been in his life for far longer than I wanted to believe. The messages went back 14 months. 14 months of flirtation and secret meetings and promises whispered in text. 14 months of my husband building a second life while I was fighting to keep our son alive. I found the thread from the day Jaden was diagnosed. The day we sat in that cold hospital room and heard the word leukemia for the first time. The day my world crumbled around me. Brandon had texted her that night. Rough day. Need to see you. She had responded, come over. I'll make it better. I stared at those words until they blurred. My son was dying and my husband was running to another woman for comfort. My son was fighting for his life, and Brandon was building his escape route. The messages continued through every milestone of Jaden's illness. The first round of chemo. The infection that nearly killed him. The brief remission that gave us hope. The relapse that took it all away. Through all of it, Brandon was with her. Not every night, but enough. Too much. Lunch dates when he said he was in meetings. Weekend work emergencies that were really hotel rooms. Even a trip to a coastal resort while I was sitting vigil at Jaden's hospital bed. I put the phone back exactly where I found it. I went to the bathroom and gripped the sink and stared at my reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at me was someone I barely recognized. Her eyes were hollow from grief and sleepless nights. Her skin was dull, her hair limp. She looked like someone who had been fighting a war and losing badly. But there was something else in those eyes now. Something new. Determination. I was not going to let Brandon destroy me. He had already taken so much. He had stolen the last months I could have had with my son, those precious moments when I was too exhausted from doing everything alone because he was always at work. He had stolen my trust, my belief in our marriage, my faith that I knew the man I had married. He would not steal my future too. Over the next few weeks, I became an expert at pretending. I cooked dinners and made small talk and went through the motions of being a wife who was simply drowning in grief. Brandon seemed relieved by my distance. He gave him cover for his distraction, his late nights, his constant texting. He thought I was too broken to notice it. I started keeping a notebook hidden in the back of my closet. Every lie he told, I wrote it down with the date and time. Every time his story did not add up, I made a note. Every piece of evidence I could gather without alerting him, I documented carefully. Denise came over twice a week with the excuse of checking on me. We would sit in my kitchen and whisper like conspirators while I updated her on what I had learned. You need a lawyer, she said one evening. Someone who can tell you what you are entitled to, what your options are. I know. I'm looking. And you need to think about yourself. Your career, your future. What are you going to do when this is over? I had not thought that far ahead. For the past year, my entire existence had revolved around Jaden's illness. Before that, I had put my own dreams on hold to raise him, to support Brandon's career, to be the perfect wife and mother our families expected me to be. I used to have ambitions. I had a degree in interior design and a portfolio full of projects I never got to pursue because life kept getting in the way. I had plans to start my own business, to build something that was mine. Somewhere along the way, I had forgotten all of that. I don't know, I admitted. I don't know who I am without Jaden. I don't know who I am without being Brandon's wife. Denise reached across the table and took my hand. Then maybe it is time to find out. That night I pulled out my old portfolio from the storage closet. The designs were dated now, but the talent was still there. I could see it in the clean lines and thoughtful spaces, the way I had always been able to imagine how a room could become a home. I sat on the floor of my closet, surrounded by sketches and fabric samples and magazine clippings I had saved for years, and I cried. Not for Brandon, not for the marriage I was about to lose, but for the woman I used to be. The woman who had dreams and believed she could achieve them. Jaden's school photo sat on my nightstand where I could see it every morning. I picked it up and held it to my chest. "I'm going to be okay, baby," I whispered. "Mama is going to be okay." It was the first time I believed it might be true. I became a ghost in my own home. Every morning I woke up before Brandon and made coffee and pretended to be present while my mind cataloged his every move. Every evening I sat across from him at dinner and nodded at his lies while memorizing the details for my notebook. Every night I lay beside him in the dark and imagined the day I would finally be free. The grief for Jaden was still there, a constant ache that never fully faded. But it had begun to exist alongside something else, a cold determination that gave me focus when the pain threatened to swallow me whole. 1 month after the funeral, I decided to dig deeper. Brandon's company, Hammond Marketing Group, had a quarterly newsletter that featured employee spotlights. I found the archive online and searched for Tiffany Reed. There she was in the June issue from 2 years ago, smiling in a professional headshot with a brief biography underneath. Tiffany Reed, account manager. Joined the company in March. Graduated from State University with a degree in communications. Enjoys hiking, yoga, and travel. I stared at her photo for a long time. She was attractive in an obvious way, with perfect makeup and hair that probably took an hour to style. She looked young. Too young. The kind of woman who did not yet have stretch marks or worry lines or the weight of real life pressing down on her shoulders. I wondered what Brandon saw when he looked at her. An escape from the stress of a sick child and a tired wife? A reminder of who he used to be before responsibility and loss took their toll? Or maybe he just saw a warm body that made him feel good about himself. The thought made me sick. I printed out her photo and added it to my notebook. Then I went back to Brandon's phone that night and dug even deeper into their messages. What I found made everything worse. There was a conversation from 8 months ago, right in the middle of Jaden's treatment. Brandon had been complaining about how hard it was at home, how sad I was all the time, how the constant hospital visits were wearing him down. Tiffany had responded, "You deserve someone who can focus on you. She's so wrapped up in the kid she barely notices you exist." The kid. She called my dying son, the kid. And Brandon had not defended him. Had not corrected her. Had simply agreed that things were difficult and he needed an escape from all the sadness. I had to put the phone down because my hands were shaking so badly I could not read anymore. My son was fighting for his life, and his father was complaining about it to his mistress. My baby was suffering through chemotherapy and blood transfusions and more pain than any child should ever know, and Brandon was tired of the sadness. I went to the bathroom and threw up. When I came back out, I made myself read more. I needed to know everything. I needed to understand exactly who my husband was so I would never doubt my decision to leave him. The messages painted a clear picture. Brandon had been planning to leave me. He and Tiffany had discussed it multiple times, always in vague terms that gave him deniability. "When things settle down," he would say. "When the timing is right. When I can figure out a way to do this without destroying everyone." But Jaden's death had complicated his plans. He could not leave his grieving wife right after losing their son. It would make him look like a monster. So he was waiting, biding his time, playing the dutiful husband until enough time passed that his exit would seem less cruel. I was just a problem to be managed until the coast was clear. I put the phone back and went to my closet where I kept my notebook. I wrote down everything I had learned, every painful detail, every word that proved how deep his betrayal went. Then I sat on the floor with my knees pulled to my chest and let myself feel all of it. The anger came first, hot and righteous and almost welcome after so many weeks of numbness. Then the sadness, the grief for the marriage I thought I had, the family we were supposed to be. And beneath it all, a strange kind of relief. I had not imagined it. I had not misinterpreted what I saw in that parking lot. My husband really was the villain of this story, and now I had proof. The next day I drove to Jaden's grave. It was early morning, the grass still wet with dew, and I was alone in the cemetery except for the groundskeeper mowing in the distance. I sat on the bench next to my son's headstone and told him everything. Daddy has been lying to us, baby. He's been with another woman. He was with her when you were sick, when we needed him the most. I don't understand how he could do that. I don't understand how anyone could be so selfish. The wind rustled through the trees, and for a moment I let myself pretend it was Jaden answering me. I know you loved him. He was your daddy, and you loved him because that is what children do. But I need you to know that none of this was your fault. You were perfect, Jaden. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, and I would not trade a single second of being your mama for anything in the world. I reached out and touched the cold stone where his name was carved. I'm going to be okay. I promise you, baby. Mama is going to be okay. That afternoon I called Denise and asked her to meet me for lunch. We went to a small cafe far from our neighborhood, somewhere no one would know us. I found out more, I told her. It's worse than I thought. I showed her the notes I had transcribed from Brandon's messages. I watched her face change as she read, the color draining from her cheeks, her jaw tightening with anger. He complained about the hospital visits, she said flatly. While his son was dying of cancer, he complained about having to go to the hospital. Yes. And she called Jaden the kid. Like he was an inconvenience. Yes. Denise set down the papers and looked at me with fire in her eyes. I want to destroy him. I want to walk into his office right now and tell everyone what kind of man he really is. No. Not yet. Why not? He deserves it. He deserves worse than public humiliation. He does. And he will get it. But not until I am ready. I need to be standing on my own 2 feet before I kick his out from under him. Denise exhaled slowly, visibly trying to calm herself. You're right. I know you're right. I hate him so much right now I can barely see straight. I know. Believe me, I know. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of everything I had learned pressing down on both of us. What do you need? Denise finally asked. What can I do? I need to find a lawyer. A good one. Someone who will help me protect myself and get what I deserve from this divorce. I know someone. My cousin used her when she divorced her husband a few years ago. She's expensive, but she's brutal. The kind of lawyer who does not lose. That's exactly what I need. Denise sent me the contact information that afternoon. Claudia Bennett, attorney at law. I stared at the name on my phone for a long time before I finally made the call. The receptionist asked what kind of case I was inquiring about. Divorce, I said. I need to file for divorce. Can you tell me a little about your situation? I took a deep breath. My husband has been having an affair for over a year. Our son just died, and I discovered the affair on the day of the funeral. I have documentation of his infidelity, and I want to make sure I am protected when I leave him. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Let me see if Ms. Bennett has time to meet with you this week. She did. We scheduled an appointment for Thursday afternoon, while Brandon would be safely at work thinking his secret was still hidden. That night I looked at my husband across the dinner table and felt something shift inside me. The love I once had for him was gone, burned away by the weight of his lies. In its place was only cold resolve. He was still talking about his day, some project at work that was taking longer than expected. I nodded and made the appropriate sounds of interest while my mind was somewhere else entirely. In 2 days I would take the first real step toward my freedom. Brandon smiled at me, that same smile I once found so charming. Thank you for being so understanding, he said. I know I've been working a lot, but things will slow down soon. I promise. I smiled back. I know, honey. I know. Claudia Bennett's office was on the 15th floor of a glass tower downtown, the kind of building that made you feel small just looking at it from the street. The reception area was all clean lines and neutral colors, designed to project success and competence. I was terrified. The receptionist led me to a corner office where a woman in her 50s sat behind a mahogany desk. She had silver hair cut short and sharp, and eyes that seemed to take my measure the moment I walked through the door. Mrs. Thompson, please have a seat. I sat in one of the leather chairs across from her desk and folded my hands in my lap to keep them from shaking. Thank you for seeing me on such short notice. My assistant gave me the basics. Husband having an affair, recently deceased child, you have documentation. Is that accurate? Yes. How long have you been married? 12 years. Any other children? No. Just Jaden. He was enough. Claudia nodded, her expression softening slightly. I'm sorry for your loss. Losing a child is something no parent should ever have to endure. Thank you. She opened a leather folder and uncapped a pen. Tell me everything. Start from the beginning and do not leave anything out. So I did. I told her about finding Brandon with Tiffany in the school parking lot 2 hours after the funeral. I told her about the messages on his phone, the 14 months of lies, the complaints about hospital visits, the plans to leave me when the timing was right. I told her about my notebook full of evidence, the dates and times and details I had been collecting. Claudia wrote steadily as I spoke, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I finished, she set down her pen and looked at me directly. Your husband is a piece of work. I almost laughed. Yes, he is. Here is what I can tell you. North Carolina is an equitable distribution state, which means marital property is divided fairly but not necessarily equally. However, infidelity can impact the distribution, especially when we can show he was spending marital funds on his affair. He took her to a resort. A coastal trip while I was at the hospital with Jaden. Do you have records of that? Credit card statements, receipts. I have some. I can get more. Good. I also want you to start thinking about what you want. The house, retirement accounts, any shared investments. We will need to build a complete picture of your marital assets. I nodded, feeling both overwhelmed and empowered at the same time. What about timing? I asked. I do not want to file right away. I need to get myself in a better position first. Claudia leaned back in her chair and studied me. That's smart. Most people rush into these things emotionally and end up worse off for it. What kind of position are you trying to build? Financial independence. I want my own income, my own path forward. I do not want to need anything from him to survive. Do you have skills? Education? I have a degree in interior design. I used to dream of starting my own business, but I put it aside when we had Jaden. When life got complicated. And now? I straightened in my chair. Now I want to make that dream happen. Claudia smiled, the first real smile she had given me since I walked in. I like you, Mrs. Thompson. You have a spine. Not everyone who sits in that chair does. I did not always have one. But losing your child and discovering your husband is a liar has a way of building character. I imagine it does. She closed her folder. Here's my advice. Take 6 months. Build your business, establish some financial independence, get your feet under you. During that time, keep documenting everything your husband does. When you are ready to file, we will hit him with everything we have. And in the meantime, act normal. Do not let him suspect anything. Men like your husband get sloppy when they think they are getting away with it. The more evidence he generates, the stronger our case. I left Claudia's office feeling something I had not felt in months. Oh, that weekend, I visited Aunt Gloria at her little house on the outskirts of town. She had been my mother's sister, the woman who raised me after my parents died in a car accident when I was 16. She was the closest thing to a mother I had left. Her front porch was covered in plants, the way it always was, and she was sitting in her rocking chair when I pulled up, like she had been expecting me. Baby girl, she said as I climbed the steps. I was wondering when you would come. I sat down in the chair next to her and looked out at her flower garden, a riot of colors that seemed to defy the grief weighing on my heart. How did you know I needed to come? Because I know you, and I know something has changed. I could hear it in your voice when you called last week. Aunt Gloria had always been able to see right through me. There was no point in pretending. Brandon is having an affair. Has been for over a year. She did not gasp or cry out or even look surprised. She just nodded slowly, her weathered hands folded in her lap. I wondered about that boy. Something about the way he moved through the world never sat right with me. Why didn't you say anything? Because you loved him. Because sometimes people need to discover the truth for themselves. Would you have believed me if I had told you a year ago that your husband was stepping out? I thought about it honestly. No, probably not. Exactly. She reached over and took my hand. What are you going to do? I am going to leave him. But not yet. I am building something first, getting myself ready to stand on my own. Aunt Gloria smiled, and her eyes glistened with something that looked like pride. That is my girl. Do not let that man take any more from you than he already has. I will not. We sat together in comfortable silence, watching the sun move across the sky. After a while, Aunt Gloria spoke again. You know, your mama was a lot like you. Strong on the inside but soft enough to love deeply. She would be proud of the woman you are becoming. I felt tears prick at my eyes. I miss her. I miss Jaden. I miss having people in my life who love me without conditions. You still have that. You have me. You have your friend Denise. And someday when you are ready, you will find someone who sees your worth and treasures it the way you deserve. I am not sure I believe in love anymore. Aunt Gloria squeezed my hand. That is okay for now. Believe in yourself instead. Love will find its way back when it is time. On the drive home, I stopped at the cemetery. I sat by Jaden's grave and told him about my meeting with the lawyer, about my plans to start over, about everything I was going to build in his memory. I will not let him win, baby. I promise you that. Daddy does not get to break us and walk away without consequences. The wind rustled through the flowers someone had left on his headstone. I did not know who had been visiting, maybe Brandon's mother or one of the parents from Jaden's school. It did not matter. What mattered was that my son was still being remembered, still being loved. I drove home with a new sense of purpose. That night I pulled out my old design portfolio and started updating it. The styles had changed since I had been active in the field, so I spent hours online researching current trends, studying successful designers, imagining how I would put my own stamp on the work. Brandon came home late as usual. He found me at the kitchen table surrounded by fabric samples and paint chips. "What's all this?" he asked, his voice casual but with an edge of curiosity underneath. "I am thinking about getting back into design. Something to keep my mind busy." He seemed relieved by this explanation. A hobby. Something harmless to distract his grieving wife while he continued his affair undisturbed. "That's great, honey. You should definitely do that." "I think I will." After he went to bed, I stayed up late working on my business plan. I chose a name, Thompson Interiors. I sketched out a logo. I made a list of everything I would need to get started. For the first time since losing Jaden, I felt something other than pain and anger. I felt alive. The Riverside Business Networking event was held in a hotel ballroom downtown, the kind of gathering where everyone wore professional smiles and handed out business cards like they were dealing poker chips. I almost turned around 3 times on the way there. What was I doing? I had not worked professionally in years. I had no contacts, no reputation, nothing to offer these successful people who built empires while I was changing diapers and managing carpools. But I went anyway. I wore my red dress, the one that always made me feel confident, and I walked into that ballroom with my shoulders back and my chin up. Fake it until you make it. That was what Denise had told me that morning when I called her in a panic. Fake it until you make it. The room was crowded with people in suits and cocktail attire, clustered in groups of 3 and 4, chatting about deals and projects and opportunities. I grabbed a glass of wine from a passing waiter and forced myself to move through the crowd. Most conversations lasted only a minute or 2. The polite exchange of names and occupations, the brief description of what you do, the promise to connect later that everyone knew would probably never happen. I must have talked to a dozen people in the first hour without making any real impression. Then I met Robert Hayes. He was standing alone by the windows that overlooked the river, a man in his 50s with silver hair and kind eyes and an air of quiet confidence that set him apart from the aggressive networking happening around us. "You look like you would rather be anywhere else," he said when I approached. I laughed before I could stop myself. Is it that obvious? Only to someone who has been to about 1,000 of these things and knows the look. He extended his hand. "Robert Hayes. Nicole Thompson. What brings you here tonight, Nicole Thompson?" I hesitated. The practice speech I had been giving all night suddenly felt hollow. Something about this man's direct gaze made me want to tell the truth. "I'm starting over. I was an interior designer years ago before life got complicated. Now I am trying to build something new." Interior design. Residential or commercial? Residential mostly. But I have always wanted to do more. Commercial spaces, restaurants, boutique hotels. The kind of projects that really challenge you to think differently. Robert smiled. "That's quite a vision. Do you have a portfolio?" "I do." I pulled out my phone and showed him the photos I had uploaded, a mix of old work and concept designs I had been developing over the past few weeks. He scrolled through them slowly, his expression thoughtful. "These are good. Really good. You have an eye for space that most designers never develop." "Thank you. That means a lot coming from someone who clearly knows the industry." I have been developing commercial properties for 30 years. He handed back my phone. "I'm working on a new project right now, a boutique hotel in the Arts District. The designer I originally hired backed out last month, and I have been scrambling to find a replacement." My heart started beating faster. "Are you looking for someone new?" "I might be. Depends on whether I can find someone who understands my vision." He looked at me appraisingly. "Why do not you come by my office next week? Bring your portfolio, your ideas, whatever you have. Let us see if we might be a good fit. I tried to keep my voice steady even though I wanted to jump up and down. I would love that. Thank you. He pulled out a business card and handed it to me. Call my assistant Monday morning. She will set something up. I floated home that night. For the first time in what felt like forever, something good was happening. Something that had nothing to do with grief or betrayal or the wreckage of my marriage. This was mine. This opportunity, this possibility, this seed of a future I had been too scared to imagine. Brandon was watching television when I got home. He glanced up as I walked in but did not ask about my evening. He probably assumed I had been visiting Denise or sitting alone at Jaden's grave. How was your night? I asked, keeping my voice casual. Fine. Just a quiet evening. I knew from checking his phone that he had spent the evening texting Tiffany, sending her pictures from some restaurant they were apparently planning to visit together. But I said nothing. I simply smiled and went upstairs to remove my makeup and replay every word Robert Hayes had said. The meeting at his office was scheduled for the following Thursday. I spent every spare moment preparing, refining my portfolio, researching the arts district where the hotel would be built, developing concept boards that showed how I would approach the project. Denise came over to help me rehearse my pitch. You sound amazing, she said after I finished my presentation. Professional, knowledgeable, passionate. They would be crazy not to hire you. It's just a meeting. Nothing is guaranteed. Maybe not. But this is still huge. A few months ago you could barely get out of bed, and now you are presenting to major developers. That is progress, Nicole. That is you taking your life back. She was right. I could feel it in my bones, the way I was changing, growing, becoming someone new. Someone stronger. Thursday morning I dressed in my favorite blue blouse and navy slacks. Professional but not stuffy. I drove downtown with my portfolio bag on the passenger seat and my stomach in knots. Robert's office occupied an entire floor of a converted warehouse near the river. The space was stunning, all exposed brick and industrial beams with modern furniture and abstract art on the walls. It told me immediately that this was a man who valued good design. He met me in the conference room with a warm handshake and offered me coffee before we got down to business. I've been thinking about our conversation at the networking event, he said as we sat down. Your perspective on residential design is impressive, but hotels are a different animal. What makes you think you can make the leap? I had prepared for this question. Residential design is about understanding how people live, what makes them feel comfortable and at home. Hotel design is about creating that same feeling for guests who are away from home. The principles are the same, just applied on a larger scale with more complex logistics. Robert nodded slowly. Go on. Your project is in the arts district. That neighborhood has a distinct character, creative and eclectic, but also a little rough around the edges. The hotel needs to reflect that authenticity while still providing luxury and comfort. If you just drop in some generic upscale design, it will feel fake. But if you root the design in the neighborhood's identity while elevating the experience, you create something people actually want to be part of. I pulled out my concept boards and walked him through my vision. A lobby that felt like a gallery with rotating exhibitions from local artists. Guest rooms that mixed industrial elements with warm, inviting textures. A rooftop bar that offered views of the skyline while feeling like a hidden neighborhood gem. Robert listened without interrupting, studying each board carefully. You did your homework, he said when I finished. I believe in being prepared. Tell me something. Why are you really doing this? Starting over at this point in your life? There has to be a story there. I considered deflecting, giving him some polished answer about seeking new challenges or pursuing long-time dreams. But something about his directness made me want to be honest. I lost my son 6 months ago. Leukemia. And somewhere in the grief, I realized that I had spent years putting my own dreams aside, thinking there would always be time later. But there is not always time later. Sometimes life takes everything from you in an instant, and you are left wondering what you were waiting for. Robert was quiet for a long moment. I am sorry about your son. I cannot imagine that kind of loss. Thank you. And I understand what you mean about waiting. I built my first property when I was 42 because I spent 20 years being afraid to take the leap. He leaned back in his chair. I like your vision for the hotel. And I like you. I think we could work well together. My heart skipped. Does that mean? It means I want to offer you the project. Not as a consultant but as the lead designer. It is a significant commitment, probably 6 to 8 months of intensive work. But if you deliver what you showed me today, it could launch your career in a very real way. I had to take a breath to keep my composure. I do not know what to say. Say yes. And then get ready to work harder than you have ever worked in your life. I smiled, and for the first time in months it reached all the way to my eyes. Yes. Absolutely yes. We shook hands, and Robert promised to have his assistant send over the contract and initial project brief by the end of the week. I walked out of his office feeling like I was floating. This was really happening. Against all odds, despite everything I had lost and everything I was still facing, I was building something new. That night I visited Jaden's grave and told him everything. Mama got a job, baby. A real job designing a hotel. Can you believe it? Your mama is going to be okay. The evening light was soft and golden on the grass around his headstone. I sat there until the sun went down, feeling closer to my son than I had since the day he died. He was gone, but his memory was still pushing me forward. His loss had broken me open, and now I was filling those cracks with something new. Not happiness, not yet, but hope. The quiet, stubborn belief that good things were still possible. And somewhere in my heart, I made him a promise. This was just the beginning. 3 months passed like a dream I was slowly waking into. Thompson Interiors existed now, officially registered with the state, with a logo I designed myself and a small office space I rented in a converted loft building downtown. The walls were still bare and the furniture was secondhand, but it was mine. Every inch of it represented something I had built with my own hands. Robert's hotel project consumed most of my waking hours. The design phase was complete, and we had moved into the selection and procurement stage, which meant endless meetings with vendors and contractors and subcontractors who all had opinions about how things should be done. I learned more in those 3 months than I had in 4 years of design school. Robert was a patient teacher, guiding me through the business side of development while giving me freedom to execute my creative vision. He introduced me to his network of contacts, wrote me letters of reference, and treated me like a colleague rather than a novice. At home I maintained the facade. Brandon noticed that I was different. How could he not? I was gone more often, absorbed in my work, no longer the shell of a woman who drifted through rooms with empty eyes. He commented on it occasionally, testing the waters. You seem better lately, he said one evening when I came home late from the office. The work helps. Keeps my mind occupied. That's good. That's really good. He seemed relieved. A wife with a hobby was much easier to manage than a wife sinking into depression. A wife building a career was too busy to notice the signs he was carelessly leaving everywhere. But I noticed. I always noticed. His lies had become sloppy. He did not bother clearing his browser history anymore, so I saw the restaurant reservations and hotel bookings. He came home smelling of perfume that was not mine and blamed it on a client who was an aggressive hugger. He took phone calls in the garage and thought the walls were thick enough to muffle his laughter. I documented everything in my notebook, which had grown thick with evidence. Claudia would be pleased. One Sunday afternoon, I drove to the cemetery with flowers for Jaden's grave. The spring air was crisp and clean, and new grass had begun to grow over the turned earth. 6 months since we buried him. Half a year since I last held his hand. I'm sorry I have not visited as much lately, I said, arranging the flowers in the vase at the base of his headstone. I have been so busy with work, but I think about you every single day. Every design choice I make, every meeting I walk into, I think about what you would say if you could see me. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of early spring. The hotel is going to be beautiful, baby. I wish you could see it. There is this rooftop terrace where you can see the whole city, and I designed a little reading corner in the lobby that reminds me of the one we used to have in your room. The one where we would read dinosaur books together. My voice caught and I had to pause for a moment. I'm going to leave Daddy soon. Not yet, but soon. I have been waiting until I am strong enough to stand on my own, and I think I am almost there. I know you loved him. I know you would want me to try to make things work. But he hurt us, Jaden. He hurt both of us, and I cannot pretend anymore. A bird landed on a nearby headstone, watching me with its head tilted to the side. I hope you are somewhere good. Somewhere without pain or needles or hospital rooms. Somewhere you can run and play and laugh the way you used to before you got sick. I pressed my hand to the cold stone of his headstone. I love you, baby. I will always love you. That night I had dinner with Denise at our favorite Italian restaurant. She had been following my progress obsessively, demanding updates every few days, cheering me on like a one-woman fan club. The hotel opens in 3 months, I told her over pasta. Robert says if the reviews are good, it could put Thompson Interiors on the map. That's incredible. I am so proud of you. I could not have done it without you. You believed in me when I did not believe in myself. Denise waved her hand dismissively. Please. I just told you what anyone with eyes could see. You're talented, Nicole. You always have been. You just needed someone to remind you. We talked about the project, about my plans for expansion once the hotel was complete, about everything I wanted to build for my future. Then Denise grew serious. What about Brandon? When are you going to pull the trigger? Soon. I am thinking after the hotel opens. Once I have proof that I can support myself, that the business is real and not just a pipe dream. And you are okay with waiting that long? Living with him, sleeping next to him, pretending everything is fine? I considered the question carefully. It is not easy. But every day that passes I care less. The anger is still there, but it has become quieter. More focused. I do not want to destroy him in a fit of rage. I want to dismantle him systematically, with evidence and lawyers and absolute certainty that I will come out the other side intact. Denise nodded slowly. You have changed, you know. A year ago you would have confronted him immediately. You would have screamed and cried and probably taken him back after he groveled enough. A year ago I had Jaden. I had hoped that my marriage was worth saving. I had a lot of illusions that have since been shattered. And now I know exactly what I am dealing with. And I know exactly what I am worth. Denise raised her wine glass. To Nicole Thompson. Interior designer, businesswoman, and stone-cold strategist. I clinked my glass against hers. To surviving. The weeks that followed were a blur of activity. The hotel renovation entered its final phase, and I was on site nearly every day overseeing the installation of furniture, fixtures, and finishing details. Every corner had to be perfect. Every element had to align with the vision I had presented to Robert all those months ago. Brandon barely noticed my absence. He was too busy with his own parallel life, the one he thought I knew nothing about. We passed each other like strangers sharing an address, polite and distant and utterly disconnected. One evening I found him sitting in the living room when I came home late, a look on his face I had not seen before. Worried. Almost nervous. We need to talk, he said. My heart stuttered. Had he found my notebook? Had someone told him about the lawyer? About what? About us. About where things are going. I sat down across from him, my face carefully neutral. I am listening. Brandon ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I knew meant he was uncomfortable. I feel like we have been drifting apart. Ever since Jaden. I know things have been hard. But sometimes I look at you and I do not recognize the woman I married. The irony was so thick I almost laughed. People change, Brandon. Grief changes people. I know. I want to make sure we are okay. That we are going to be okay. I looked at my husband. At this man who had betrayed me in every way possible, who was sitting here pretending to care about our marriage while texting his mistress under the table. We will be fine, I said. We just need time. He seemed relieved by my answer. He probably thought my newfound independence was a healthy way of coping with loss, not a careful preparation for the moment I would blow his life apart. Okay, that is what I thought. I just wanted to check in. I appreciate that. He went back to his phone and I went upstairs to my office. Behind the locked door, I added one more note to my notebook. Asked if we were okay. Did not actually care about the answer. So, very soon, I would give him the answer he deserved. The Riverside Boutique Hotel opened on a perfect Saturday in June. I stood in the lobby I had designed, watching the first guests stream through the doors, their faces lighting up as they took in the soaring ceilings and curated artwork and carefully chosen textures that made the space feel both elegant and welcoming. You did it, Robert said, appearing beside me with a glass of champagne. This is exactly what I envisioned and somehow also better than I imagined. I had a good team. And a good mentor. Do not sell yourself short. This is your work, Nicole. Own it. A photographer from City Living magazine was circling the space, snapping photos for the feature they were running in next month's issue. A reporter had already interviewed me about my design philosophy, my approach to the project, my plans for Thompson Interiors. 6 months ago I was barely surviving. Now I was standing in the middle of my own creation, being photographed for magazines and celebrating with investors and clients who wanted to hire me for their next projects. Denise arrived around noon, practically vibrating with excitement. This is incredible. You are incredible. I cannot believe you designed all of this. Believe it. I am so proud of you I could cry. She pulled me into a tight hug. Jaden would be so proud too. That hit me in a tender place, the mention of my son on this day of triumph. But instead of pulling me under, it lifted me up. I was doing this for him. Every success, every milestone, every step forward was dedicated to his memory. Brandon did not come to the opening. I had not invited him. I told him I had a work event, something minor, nothing he needed to worry about. He had not asked questions. He was probably grateful for the free afternoon to spend with Tiffany. That evening, as the last guests filtered out and the staff began cleaning up, Robert pulled me aside. "I have something for you." He handed me an envelope. Inside was a check, the final payment for my work on the project. It was more money than I had ever earned in my life. "I am also prepared to invest in Thompson Interiors," he continued, "if you are interested in expanding. I believe in your talent, Nicole. I have watched you grow into a real force over these past months. I want to help you build something that will last." I stared at the check in my hands, then at this man who had given me a chance when I had nothing but dreams and desperation. "Why? Why would you do this for me?" Robert smiled, a warm expression that softened his businessman's face. "Because I see something in you that reminds me of myself 20 years ago. Hungry, talented, and just needing someone to believe in you. I had a mentor who gave me my first opportunity. Now I get to be that for you. I do not know how to thank you. Build something great. That is all the thanks I need." I drove home that night feeling like a different person than the woman who had discovered her husband's affair in a school parking lot 9 months ago. The grief was still there, the loss of Jaden a wound that would never fully heal. But I had transformed that pain into something productive, something real. I was ready. The next week, I called Claudia Bennett and told her it was time to move forward. "Are you sure?" she asked. "Once we file, there is no going back." "I'm sure. I have never been more sure of anything." "Good. Let us destroy him." We spent 3 days going over every piece of evidence I had collected. The messages, the receipts, the photos, the hotel bookings, the pattern of deception that stretched back more than a year. Claudia was impressed. "You documented everything. Most clients come to me with suspicions and feelings. You brought me a case file. I wanted to be thorough. You were. This is airtight, Nicole. He has no defense." The plan was simple. I would serve Brandon with divorce papers at his office, in front of his colleagues, during a team meeting. Maximum impact. Maximum humiliation. He wanted to be the victim, the grieving father overwhelmed by tragedy. I was going to show everyone exactly who he really was. Before we filed, I did one more thing. I visited Jaden's grave on a quiet Wednesday afternoon. The summer sun was strong overhead, and the cemetery was empty except for me. "I'm doing it, baby. Tomorrow I'm going to tell Daddy the truth. I'm going to end this chapter and start a new one." I sat in the grass beside his headstone, my green dress bright against the green lawn, and told him about the hotel opening, about Robert's investment, about everything I had built in the months since his death. "You gave me strength, Jaden. Even gone, you give me strength. I hope wherever you are, you can see your mama now. I hope you are proud of who I am becoming." The wind rustled through the trees, and I let myself imagine it was him answering. "Yes, Mama. I am proud." I stayed until the sun began to set, then drove home for my last night as Brandon Thompson's wife. Tomorrow everything would change. That night I lay awake in the dark, going over the plan in my head. Every detail, every possible response, every word I would say when I finally told him I knew everything. Brandon slept peacefully beside me, oblivious to what was coming. Tomorrow. The Hammond Marketing Group occupied the entire 4th floor of a modern office building downtown. Glass walls, open floor plans, a trendy startup vibe despite being a company that had been around for 15 years. I arrived at 2 in the afternoon, when Brandon's team meeting was scheduled to begin. I was wearing a red dress, the same one I wore to the networking event where I met Robert. My armor. Claudia had offered to come with me, but I refused. This was something I needed to do alone. The receptionist recognized me from company events. "Mrs. Thompson. Brandon is in a meeting, but I can let him know you are here. Actually, I need to speak with him right now. It is urgent. Is everything okay?" I smiled. "It will be." She looked uncertain but picked up the phone and called the conference room. A moment later, Brandon appeared in the hallway, his face a mixture of confusion and concern. "Nicole? What are you doing here? Is something wrong? We need to talk." "No. In your meeting." "In my meeting? I do not understand." "You will." I walked past him toward the conference room where a dozen of his colleagues sat around a long table, tablets and coffee cups scattered in front of them. They all looked up when I entered, their faces registering surprise at the unexpected interruption. Brandon followed me and still confused. "Nicole, whatever this is, it can wait. We are in the middle of..." "No. It cannot wait." I turned to face the room, my heart pounding but my voice steady. "I apologize for interrupting your meeting. I promise this will not take long." I reached into my bag and pulled out the envelope containing the divorce papers. I handed it to Brandon, who stared at it like I had handed him a snake. What is this? You are being served. I am filing for divorce. The room went silent. Brandon's face cycled through a dozen emotions: shock, confusion, fear, and finally anger. You cannot be serious. Nicole, whatever is going on, we can work this out. Can we? Can we work out the 14 months you spent having an affair with Tiffany Reed while our son was dying of cancer? I heard gasps around the table. Someone dropped their coffee cup. Brandon went pale. I do not know what you are talking about. Really? Then let me remind you. I pulled out my phone and read from the messages I had screenshotted. Rough day. Need to see you. That was the night Jaden was diagnosed. The night our 7-year-old found out he had leukemia. And you responded by running to your mistress for comfort. Brandon grabbed my arm. Stop. We do not need to do this here. I pulled away. Actually, we do. Because you have been lying to everyone in this room for over a year. They think you are a dedicated family man. They feel sorry for you because you lost your son. They do not know that you spent Jaden's entire illness sneaking around with your coworker. I looked at the stunned faces around the table. Ask him where he was the weekend of March 15th. He told me he was at a team retreat. In reality, he was at a beach resort with Tiffany Reed while I sat alone at our son's hospital bed. Brandon's face had gone from pale to red. You went through my phone. You violated my privacy. And you violated our marriage vows. And your dying son. And everything we built together. My voice cracked, but I held myself together. I saw you in the parking lot at Jefferson Elementary, Brandon. 2 hours after we buried Jaden. I watched you kiss her while our son was still fresh in the ground. The silence in the room was deafening. I did not come here to make a scene, I continued, my voice steady again. I came here because you do not deserve to hide anymore. Everyone in your life should know exactly who you are. I picked up the envelope from where Brandon had dropped it on the table. These are your copies of the divorce papers. My lawyer will be in touch. I expect you to be out of the house by the end of the week. I turned and walked toward the door. Brandon's voice stopped me. Nicole, please. I'm sorry. I know I messed up, but we can fix this. Couples therapy, whatever you need. Do not throw away 12 years. I looked back at him. At this man I had loved, had built a life with, had trusted with everything. You threw it away, Brandon. Not me. You threw it away the first time you chose her over us. I was struggling. Jaden's illness was so hard, and you were so consumed with taking care of him. I felt invisible. Your son was dying, and you felt invisible. I shook my head. You are not the victim here. You do not get to rewrite this story. Please. No. We are done. I walked out of that conference room and did not look back. In the elevator, my hands started shaking. In the lobby, tears began streaming down my face. By the time I reached my car, I was sobbing so hard I could barely breathe. But underneath the tears, underneath the grief and rage and exhaustion, there was something else. Relief. It was over. The pretending, the watching, the waiting. I had done what I came to do. Denise was waiting at my house when I arrived. I had texted her from the parking lot, and she had dropped everything to be there. How do you feel? She asked, handing me a glass of wine. Like I just jumped off a cliff and somehow survived the fall. You did survive. You more than survived. You showed him exactly who you are. I took a long drink of the wine. He tried to apologize. Tried to blame Jaden's illness for his choices. Of course he did. Men like him always find a way to make themselves the victim. I did not let him. I told him he does not get to rewrite the story. Denise smiled fiercely. That is my girl. We sat together in my living room, drinking wine and processing everything that had happened. The confrontation. The look on his face. The silence of those colleagues who had witnessed his unmasking. Around midnight, my phone buzzed with a text from Brandon. I will be out by Friday. I'm sorry. For everything. I showed it to Denise. What are you going to say? I thought for a moment. Then I typed 2 words and hit send. Goodbye, Brandon. The weeks following the confrontation were a whirlwind. Brandon moved out as promised, staying with a colleague while he figured out his next steps. The news of his affair spread through his company like wildfire, fueled by the dozen witnesses who had watched me expose him in the conference room. Regina Thompson, Brandon's mother, called me 3 days after the filing. I almost did not answer, expecting accusations and blame. But her voice when I picked up was small and broken. Nicole, I heard what happened. I need to talk to you. We met at a coffee shop near her house. She looked older than I remembered, as if the past week had aged her 10 years. I did not know, she said before I could speak. I swear to you, I had no idea what he was doing. I believe you. When he told me about the divorce, he tried to make it sound like you were the one being unreasonable. Grief-stricken, unstable, unable to move on from Jaden's death. She shook her head. But then I heard from other people. His co-workers, his friends. The truth of what he did to you and to my grandson. Jaden loved you, Regina. He loved his grandma. Her eyes filled with tears. I loved him too. And I failed him. I failed both of you by raising a son who could do such terrible things. You did not fail anyone. Brandon made his own choices. Maybe. But I am still sorry. I am sorry for the pain he caused you. I am sorry I was not there more during Jaden's illness. I am sorry for everything. I reached across the table and took her hand. You were there when we needed you. You held Jaden's hand during his treatments. You read him stories when he was too sick to play. Whatever Brandon did, that is not your fault. Regina squeezed my hand, tears streaming down her face. I hope you find happiness, Nicole. You deserve it after everything you have been through. I am working on it. Every day I am working on it. Meanwhile, Brandon's carefully constructed life continued to crumble. The affair became common knowledge at Hammond Marketing Group. His professional reputation, built on the image of a dedicated family man, was in ruins. Colleagues who had trusted him now looked at him with barely concealed contempt. Anne Tiffany Reed disappeared from his life almost immediately. I heard the details secondhand, through the network of gossip that connects all workplaces. Once the affair became public, Tiffany wanted nothing to do with Brandon. The excitement of a secret relationship evaporated when it became a public scandal. She transferred to a different department and refused to speak to him. Denise summed it up perfectly. She wanted the thrill of being the other woman. She did not want to be the villain in everyone's story. I did not feel sorry for either of them. That same week, City Living magazine published their feature on the Riverside Boutique Hotel. The article was glowing, praising the design as a masterful blend of industrial authenticity and refined comfort, and calling Thompson Interiors a firm to watch. My phone started ringing with inquiries from potential clients. Restaurant owners, homeowners with renovation projects, even a developer interested in discussing a new residential building. Robert called to congratulate me. I told you this project would put you on the map. Are you ready for what comes next? I think I am. I finally think I am. I hired my first employee, a young designer named Kevin who had just graduated from the same program I attended years ago. He reminded me of myself at that age, hungry and talented and eager to learn. I promised myself I would be the mentor to him that Robert had been to me. The divorce proceedings moved quickly thanks to Claudia's preparation. Brandon tried to fight some of the property distribution, but the evidence of his affair and his spending on Tiffany during their relationship worked against him. In the end, I got the house, half of our savings, and a clean break from 12 years of marriage. 1 month after the filing, everything was finalized. I signed the papers in Claudia's office on a bright Thursday morning. When I walked out into the sunshine, I felt lighter than I had in years. That afternoon, I visited Jaden's grave. It is done, baby. The divorce is final. I am free. The summer breeze carried the scent of flowers, and I let myself sit in the peace of the moment. I know this is not how any of us imagined our lives would go. You were supposed to grow up and graduate and become a paleontologist or whatever else you decided you wanted to be. I was supposed to grow old with your father, watching you build your own life. I touched the letters of his name carved into the stone. But life does not always follow the plan. Sometimes it breaks you down completely so you can rebuild into something new. That is what I am doing, Jaden. I am rebuilding. And I am going to be okay. A butterfly landed on the headstone, its wings bright blue against the gray granite. I am going to be okay, I said again, and this time I believed it completely. 1 year later, I stood in the lobby of the Riverside Boutique Hotel, watching guests move through the space I had created. The 1-year anniversary celebration was in full swing, with champagne and music and a photographer capturing every moment. So much had changed since that terrible day when I buried my son and discovered my husband's betrayal. So much had been built from the ashes of that destruction. Thompson Interiors had grown into a real company with 6 employees, a beautiful office space, and a client list that would have seemed impossible when I first walked into that networking event in my red dress. We had completed a dozen projects in the past year, each one adding to our reputation, each one proving that my vision was worth believing in. Robert raised his glass to me from across the room, a proud smile on his face. He had been more than an investor. He had been a true friend and mentor, someone who believed in me when I was still learning to believe in myself. Denise appeared at my side, her arm looping through mine. Can you believe this is your life now? A year ago you were planning your escape, and now you are practically a celebrity. I laughed. I would not go that far. I would. Did you see the article in Architectural Digest? They called you one of the most exciting new voices in Southern design. That is celebrity-level, girl. I had seen the article. I kept a copy framed in my office, right next to the photo of Jaden that I looked at every single day. None of this would have happened without you, I told her. You pushed me when I was ready to give up. You believed in me when I could not believe in myself. That is what best friends are for. Besides, watching you succeed has been the highlight of my year. Maybe my decade. The party continued around us, filled with laughter and music and the bright chatter of successful people celebrating success. But my favorite moment came later, after the crowd had thinned and the photographers had packed up their equipment. Robert found me standing by the window that overlooked the city lights. Big night, he said. The biggest. I am proud of you, Nicole. Not just for the business but for everything. You took the worst year of your life and transformed it into something beautiful. I had help. You had opportunity. What you did with it was all you. We stood in comfortable silence, watching the city sparkle below. What is next? He asked. I do not know yet. I have some ideas. A new hotel project, maybe. Or a restaurant concept I have been sketching. There is so much I want to build. And personally? Are you ready to open your heart again? I considered the question. A year ago I would have said never. But time had softened those edges, and I had started to believe that love might find me again someday. Maybe. When the right person comes along. But for now I am complete on my own. I do not need anyone to make me whole. Robert nodded approvingly. That is the best place to be. Happy with yourself first. Everything else follows from there. The next morning, I woke early and drove to the cemetery with flowers in my passenger seat. The morning light was soft and perfect, casting a gentle glow over Jaden's headstone. I had planted flowers around it in the spring, and they had bloomed beautifully through the summer. Happy anniversary, baby, I said, arranging the fresh bouquet in the vase. 1 year since everything changed. 1 year since Mama's life fell apart and somehow, against all odds, came back together. I sat in the grass in my green dress, the color of new beginnings, and talked to my son the way I did every week. I created a scholarship in your name. 4 kids with leukemia and their families, to help with the expenses that insurance does not cover. The first recipient was a little girl named Isabella. She loves dinosaurs too, just like you did. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of summer flowers. I wish you could see me now, Jaden. I wish you could see the life I am building. Not because it is perfect, but because it is mine. I fought for it. I earned it. And every success, every celebration, every good thing that happens from now on, it is dedicated to you. I pressed my hand to the sun-warmed stone and closed my eyes. In my mind I could see him perfectly. 7 years old with that gap-toothed grin and those eyes full of wonder. Running toward me across the playground, backpack bouncing on his shoulders, shouting "Mama," like it was the best word in the world. He was gone, but he was never forgotten. He lived in every choice I made, every risk I took, every morning I woke up and decided to keep going. I love you, baby boy. I will always love you. I stayed until the morning light had shifted to afternoon brightness, and then I drove back to the city I had claimed as my own. My phone buzzed with messages about new projects and meetings and opportunities. My calendar was full of appointments and deadlines and presentations. My life was full of work I loved and people who believed in me and a future I had built with my own 2 hands. The grief would never fully disappear. Jaden's absence would always be a tender place in my heart. But alongside that grief was something else now. Gratitude, pride, and yes, even happiness. I had survived the worst thing a mother can experience. I had discovered the worst thing a wife can discover. And I had emerged on the other side not just intact, but transformed. The woman who walked out of that school parking lot on the day of her son's funeral, shattered and betrayed and broken, was gone. In her place was someone stronger. Someone who knew her worth and refused to accept less. Someone who had taken her pain and turned it into power. The sun was high overhead as I pulled into my office parking lot, ready to face another day of building the life I deserved. I smiled at my reflection in the rearview mirror. You did it, Nicole. You really did it. And I walked into my future with my head high and my heart full, knowing that the best was still to come.